record this. And so, Jeff, I'm going to pass the baton to you, and welcome to our Isenberg class.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. And I look forward to Fred giving me the view from the real world, which is getting realer by the minute, isn't it, Fred? So let me just start with a little context as I look at this. I'm working on, I'm trying to work on a book about the end of the Gutenberg age. I'm reading books about books. And out of this, I'm getting a real sense of the historical context here. So let me just for a minute start here with the year 1450, which is when movable type became popularized. It was a century and a half to here until anyone thought to invent a newspaper in 1605. It took that long to take this self-evident thing of printing what happens in the world and telling the world what's happening, a century and a half. Next major technology change in printing didn't really come until about 1800 with the steel press and stereotyping. I won't geek out on the details. 1814, steam is added. So you get high-speed presses and you get inexpensive papers and you get the beginning of mass media and the idea of the mass. 1840s, you get wood pulp paper, which makes it a lot cheaper to print. And around there, you get the telegraph, which changes our view of distance. 1900, radio broadcast. 1950, TV. Here we are at 2020. What did I leave out? Obviously, the internet. So that's about 25 years, a little over 25 years since the introduction of the commercial web in 1994. By that logic, back here over to Gutenberg, we're at the year 1475. Martin Luther isn't born yet. The Reformation hasn't started yet. The newspaper hasn't been invented yet, and it's still more than a century off. All of which is to say, it's very early days. I am too old to know how this turns out. Maybe you're not, but maybe you too are too old to figure out how this turns out. We don't know what the internet is yet. We're still seeing the future and the analog of the past, right? Horseless carriage, icebox. We still think that the internet is a medium. I don't think it's a medium at all. The media view of the world is there's a big circle, and inside that circle called media are print and broadcast and now the internet. That's not my view of the world. My view of the world is a much bigger circle, which we call the internet, but it's the connected world, where inside that are some segments of society like social, which was basically embedded in there. Communications is all in there. And the rest is being sucked in like into a black hole. So media is being sucked in. It's more than half in there, I'd say. Education is too slow getting sucked in, but this sure sped that up, didn't it? Finance, retail, government, crime. All these things are being pulled into this new worldview we have of this connected world. The internet to me is a connection machine. It connects people with information, information with information, and machines to machines. And that's the world that we have now. That's the world you're operating in. And that's the entrepreneurial view that I would encourage you to have, to think in broad, new, revolutionary ways. So that's the end of my history moment. If you come to the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism, which I highly encourage you to think about doing, I'll give that spiel, and everybody gets nervous. I'm going to do the history of media, and I take them through 600 years in about 10 minutes. So you got the light version. So where are we as a business? We were already screwed, right? We were already in bad shape before this crisis comes. And now I think we more than ever need radical new thinking and new solutions to figure out where we are. So I wrote a post about a year ago that I called my Scorched Earth post, in which I went through every one of our revenue models and said to my colleagues in journalism, let's be bluntly, brutally honest about where we really are. And let's go through that list in a minute. Because I think then we have to look about rebuilding journalism from the ashes. I went to a newspaper in Atlanta a couple years ago, and the managing editor said at the time, you wonder why Jarvis is here. We have two houses, he said. He said, one of them is on fire. And the other one is the one Jarvis wants us to build, which I'll describe in a few minutes. But Jarvis doesn't even really have any blueprints. And meanwhile, the publisher is coming down every day saying, ad rates are down, get me more traffic. And so you throw more stuff on the fire. Traffic is down. Figure out how to get me more traffic again. And we became a traffic-oriented industry because we tried to import our mass media business models into this new world. The mass media business model was a beautiful thing while it lasted. It was that every reader sees every ad, so we charge every advertiser for every reader. Let me repeat that again. All readers see all ads, so we charge all advertisers for all readers. So if you're reading I don't have it here, a magazine, right? And I'm reading the magazine, and if I jump past the ad, doesn't matter because the publication charged the advertiser for my eyeballs seeing that ad, right? Well, that's not what happens online, obviously. You don't get to charge for every ad to every advertiser for every set of eyeballs. All you get to charge for is that which is seen. And Google came along and presented us with an entirely new business model in which Google shared the risk with the advertiser and said, only if somebody clicks do you pay. So Google's interests were now aligned with the advertisers. Google says, I want to have clickable ads and I want to help you do that. And so I'm going to put ads everywhere on the internet in relevant places where you can get clicks to that ad. And it obviously reduced the price of advertising because in a market of abundance, prices always go down. And then for us, desperation goes up because the publisher is coming down saying, less traffic, lower ad rates, give me more traffic. So what do? We do what we know in our business, which is cats and Kardashians. We know how to get traffic, and that's what we do, right? But that's not last for long. So the advertising market was already in trouble because we lost huge chunks of advertising. You've heard this story with classified advertising. We lost retail advertising as companies merge. We lost all kinds of advertising even before. Now in this crisis, last week, the Financial Times, or week before last, the Financial Times ran 2 days worth of print newspapers with 0 ads in them, 0. Now the Financial Times is a very digital company now, so they'll be okay. And they have rich subscribers, so they'll be okay. But this is the dynamic of where we head. What the hell do we do? So a lot of publications are clearly going to what we used to call circulation, now paywalls, subscription. And mind you, I happily pay for subscriptions to many things. But I don't think that all God's children are going to be able to succeed with subscription revenue. The New York Times can because the New York Times has a huge audience and a high value product. It can convert 2-3% of its 60 million online viewers to paid subscribers, and they can do well. The Washington Post can do well. It's harder, as Fred I'm sure can tell you or has told you, for a smaller publication with a smaller audience, a smaller conversion rate, a smaller dollar amount. You have to worry about churn. So subscriptions are not the messiah. We're going to try them, but they don't solve everything. And in our business, we keep on looking for a messiah, and they often turn out to be false. So I'm trying to get people to work in commerce. I was starting to succeed to get companies in news to work in commerce and start to sell things to people. I don't mean a Berkshire Eagle hat, well, that's fine. I mean helping merchants locally and nationally sell things to your audience that are relevant to your audience. One newspaper chain I convinced to do this out of one of our groups at the school, 1 year later and before COVID, had a $2 million revenue line from selling stuff. So commerce is an opportunity. Events, a lot of places we're starting to do events. Texas Tribune does tons of events. They really work well. Well, right now that's borked. So we don't have the events anymore, but we hope that'll come back. I think that's related to other things we can do. I think we can do education, for example. I think that there are ways we redefine what we are. We're not just about writing stories. We're about informing the public. Informing the public can include educating the public, telling them things they want to know, helping them do what they want to do. Some folks think that charity will save us, philanthropy. There isn't enough philanthropic money to support all the journalism we need in this country. So yes, we should try to get it. If you can grab your piece, grab it. But I don't think that's a messiah either. I do believe there are opportunities for consumer revenue in membership, for example, that works with public media, with public radio. The Guardian started a program that I helped work on that is all about, well, basically, we thought it was a membership program. It wasn't. It was begging. At the end of a long story, you'd read, the editor, Kath Viner, would put a long thing in there that says, come on, don't you feel guilty? You just used this magnificent journalism. Now, come on, give us some money so we can make this free to the world. We had one of the heads of that program come talk to another of my communities of practice at the school a few weeks ago, kind of the last flight in or out. And she said that they had just one little factoid, two. They had an ad unit, which they say, please give us money, please support this wonderful journalism. Yeah, okay. But then they had this paragraphs from the editor, Kath Viner. That converted to contribution 90 times as well as the ad, 90 times better. That having a personal connection of the editor saying this is what's going on here made a difference. Another lesson from the Guardian. Everybody thinks we talk in funnels. We're trying to get people down to a funnel where they come into our world and they pay us and they're with us forever and we get married and have children and we love them. Well, the Guardian found that a lot of the readers who gave them money were not regular Guardian readers. People who read content about public lands and how Donald Trump was going to drill oil on them and screw it up. When the Guardian did a story about that, they got a lot of contributions because people wanted to say thank you. Some people want to pay once a year, but a lot of people said, no. I want to give frequently in the year because it feels good to give to you. It feels good to reward you, Guardian. So there's a lot of ideas around membership, around thinking of people, their own affinities, what they care about, their own rewards. They may want to feel good. They may want social status. They may want access to content. They may want access to journalists. They may want access to a community. So we have to rethink consumer revenue around all of that. So, and the other one that's out there, there's some hope for, is government support. I get hives thinking about government support. Now, my British friends will say, but the BBC, and it's so wonderful, and it is wonderful, but now Boris Johnson is attacking the BBC. And my political stripes are obvious. I didn't wear my Elizabeth Warren hat today. But I would fear government support while a Donald Trump is in office, because as he calls us the enemy of the people, as he's in the press room attacks one person and praises another, if he could decide where our tax dollars went, that would be disastrous. So government is not a messiah either. So there we are. It's not a happy picture. Well, I wrote a book. I put air quotes around the book because we published it at the school, called Geeks Bearing Gifts. I'm happy to send the PDF to Charlie if you want it, in which I basically tried to answer the question, okay, smartass, now that your internet has screwed everything up, what now? And I argued in favor of what I call a relationship strategy, where I think that the essence of journalism is not about manufacturing a product called content. That is a Gutenberg era view. I think the essence of journalism is that it's a service. And we help people and communities improve their lives. And we have many, many new tools to do that. I also think that we've been looking at the idea of journalism incorrectly. And there's a professor, the late Professor James Carey of Columbia, was brilliant on this. And Carey said that properly considered, society and democracy are conversations. And that journalism is there not to inform the conversation, but to be informed by the conversation. So our primary job is to listen. I helped start a new degree at Newmark that we call social journalism. So we have a master's, and I'm going to sell the program to you a few times, try to get you to come there. We have a master's in journalism. We have a bilingual program in Spanish journalism as part of that. And then we have a new master's called social journalism, which believes that we don't start with content, we start with communities. And we listen to and observe communities. We empathize with their needs. We understand their needs. We reflect their needs back to them to make sure we're right. And then we can imagine the kind of journalism that we could bring to them. And that journalism may or may not take the form of stories and content. One of our students this last year was serving women who'd been abused, and she created an event around the theater of the oppressed to bring out their needs. Another student serves recovering addicts from opioids, and she's creating databases of resources for them. Another student serves the families of the lost to opioids, and she brought them together for events where they could bring understanding to each other. Another student serves the recently and still incarcerated, and he wants to be able to start a print publication for people in jail to understand when they get out how they can do better. So I want to broaden our view of what we do and talk about this relationship strategy. So, in fact, we have another new program, which will come to in about 10 years, in news innovation and leadership, where we have top level, but young still executives, managing editors of places like Der Spiegel and the Financial Times and Bloomberg, or vice president of the New York Times, are in this management program we started at the school. And I started my first online class with them last Thursday, and we spent an hour imagining a list of 90 definitions of communities. And by that, I mean not externally defined communities, right? Not bullshit labels like millennial, right? I don't think any of you come along and say, hi, I'm a millennial. That instead, it's a self-definition of a community. What, in fact, holds that community together themselves? Trans New Yorkers, or diabetics in Atlanta, or Jets fans, poor souls in New Jersey, or whatever, right? That there's an affinity of shared information and need, that people would define themselves this way. That's a community. So we listed a whole brainstorming of communities. Then we listed a brainstorming of the forms and technologies we could use to serve them, depending upon what their needs might be. Then we listed every revenue stream and business model we could think of. Unfortunately, that's finite, but we thought of some new ones. And then we listed the community and journalistic goals. So that was the exercise we did last week, and I have a giant spreadsheet of 50 to 90 lines each across those topics. And this Thursday, we're going to try to invent, just like you're doing, some new forms of local news. And we'll do it in an hour because, hey, it's a graduate school. We're not going to get very far, but we're going to try to blow open our thinking into new possibilities. So let me give you a few of those. And let me mention that as you think about this, the kinds of roles in media and journalism are changing. There are new job descriptions out there. We never had people called product, because we had the product. It was a newspaper. We knew how to put it out. It was a daily miracle. It was a wonderful thing. We put it out every damn day. Yeah, we'd start a new section. Yeah, we'd redesign it, but it was a newspaper. Well, now online, we have people who are devoted to creating new products. And that too starts with listening. It starts to listen to the customers, understand what their needs are, reflect those needs, empathize with those needs, come up with ideas about how to meet those needs, then go back to them and say, does this help you? And when it doesn't, go back to the drawing board, fix it again and again. It's a process called design thinking, or human-centered design is the kind of faddish name that comes out of Stanford University. But this is what you want to do as you think about how to recreate journalism. You want to listen to the people who need it. You don't want to take your idea to them first off. You want to listen first. You want to observe their needs. You want to find out, how do they get information now? How do they accomplish what they want to accomplish now? How do they communicate with their fellow community members? What are the problems they have? What do they do now that works? What do they do now that doesn't work? And out of that, you get inspired. And you think about what it is that you could do that would work with them. And then if you start to succeed with them, then you find you're creating value with them. Then you'll figure out what the business models are. And you need to do that pretty quickly. But you will. And I want to emphasize back to my historical line for a minute. The first newspapers all failed. they didn't have a business model either, right? It took time to create the business model around news. And it wasn't a great business until Steam came along and mass came along. So it changed a lot. So let me give you a few examples of things that I like out there, just as examples of creative thinking about what we are and how we operate. My favorite these days is something called spaceship media. Have any of the faculty heard of that? So spaceship media was started by, is now run by a woman, co-founder named Eve Perlman in California. Spaceship does what I think journalism should do. Now, because I have tenure at my university, I can do obnoxious things like redefine journalism. And so my new definition of journalism is this: to convene communities into respectful, informed, and productive conversation. I'll say it again. To convene communities into respectful, informed, and productive conversation. Informed is in there in the sandwich in the middle. It's critical. But if we're not respectful to each other, or don't grant each other and expect dignity of each other, the information doesn't do a damn bit of good, as we're discovering these days. So we have to understand how to bring communities together into understanding, not agreement, understanding. Then we have to inform their conversation. And remember, I think this is all about conversation. And we have to make that productive. If it's just yammering, that's fine, that's entertainment, that's not journalism. Journalism is helping people improve their lives and their communities. So to convene communities into respectful, informed, and productive conversation. Were I to give a final, that would be on it. So what does that mean? Spaceship does that. Spaceship, in its first test, right after the presidential election, found 25 women who voted for Trump in Alabama. They did this in cooperation with the newspapers there. Then they found 25 women who voted for Clinton in San Francisco. Journalist meets them all virtually, gets to know them a little bit. Then they throw them into a private Facebook group. First day, fine, talking about their jobs and their families and their sports and whatever. Second day, hell, right? Everything we know that happens. But then, my friends, magic occurred. Because then the participants, the members of the community, came to the journalist and said, we're getting in trouble over here. Can you help us out? Can you look up some stuff for us? Well, at that moment, the heavens opened and the angels sang. Because what those community members were saying is, we value an informed conversation. We want facts, and we trust you, the journalist, to get them for us. Hallelujah. Right? That's what journalism is supposed to be. That's what Spaceship does. So Spaceship works with the advanced papers, or worked with them in this case, on other projects too. One on guns across America, one on African-American students and high school teachers, a large project with women. And they developed a methodology for a respectful, informed, productive conversation. So a couple of my graduates have worked for them, and they came back with a whole notion of how to have a good local conversation. And it amounts to some simple things, like when somebody is going to ask a nasty question, say something nasty, you really want to say that? You want to turn that into a question? What are you trying to say here? Right? Just to guide people and model good behavior. The other thing they do is when people do want facts, they don't give them stories and articles. They give them what they call a fact stack. Just the facts, man. And they give that to them so that these are the things that you wanted in your conversation, that you said you needed, or we saw you needed, you were confused about or wrong about. We didn't try to correct you all. We tried to give you the facts. That's what journalists do. Now, Eve tried to work with newspapers, and that was hard because they don't have much money. And she tried to change the way newsrooms operate, and that's hard because newsrooms don't like to change. So now she's trying to start some standalone local businesses in two small markets, one in California, one on the border at the south. And I'm rooting for her. I think it's a great thing. A few other quick examples. Tortoise Media in the UK, run by the former head of news of the BBC. Tortoise as in slow media. James Harding and his partners. They have members of the community come into the newsroom every day so they can listen and hear what what they want. There's a similar effort. Google has funded 2 efforts, one with McClatchy Company in Ohio, one in the UK, where they're trying to reinvent how journalism operates locally. And they're starting with this idea of listening better to the public. There's a company called Harken, Hearken, that is basically a platform for journalists to be assigned stories by the public. They say, what are you curious about? And if you all have ideas and the journalist says, I'm too busy, I can't do them all, fight it out. And so they decide as a group which one should win. And Charlie's idea wins. Charlie wants to know what really happens to the recycling that we send out. Well, the reporter will go out, but the reporter brings Charlie with her because it's Charlie's curiosity. And the reporter wants to make sure that Charlie's curiosity is in fact filled. And they found that this yields for public media higher levels of contribution and membership because people feel more involved and they feel heard. Those are just a few examples. Are they earth-shattering? No. Are they messiahs? No. Will they solve Fred's problems tomorrow? No, sorry. But they do start to point us to a different way to think about journalism and to think about the value we provide in people's lives and the relationship that we have with them. So we've gone from a world of mass media where everybody is treated all the same because we had just one publication. It had to serve everybody all the same within these thin covers. And now we don't have to do that anymore. But we're still bringing the old business model where we had to get as many eyeballs as possible to as many ads as possible to this new world. And we're competing with others, Google and Facebook, who know things about people that we don't know. Big, giant, huge, mammoth Google knows me by my name, knows me as an individual, knows what I care about. My newspaper doesn't. It can't because the paper doesn't enable that. And we haven't brought in a skill set of understanding people as individuals who have variable value that we can exploit in various ways. So, how do you do this from the ashes? And I'm not trying to suggest that anything, I want to burn anything down, I don't. But you as young people need to learn the things you're being taught and then question it all. You need to ask, how did we get here? Follow the money. Why do we do things that way? It's always the money. Why do we have a bridge column or a gardening column in a newspaper? Because we wanted as many readers as possible so we could sell all of their eyeballs to all the advertisers all the time. But now the bridge column, if we lose 10 people, well, the bridge column was expensive. It wasn't worth it, right? Our economics change. So understand the economics of the business and how we got to where we got, why we do what we do, and then question it. I'm not suggesting you question and throw out everything, right? There are values of journalism that matter. Values I'm sure you talk about trust, about accuracy, about fairness, about completeness, about accountability. Those are values that we care about in any world. But how we do it can change completely. You can do the theater of the oppressed. You can, Center for Investigative Reporting did a play in California to bring attention to the dangerous pesticides on a strawberry field next to a high school. They've done comic books to express journalism in ways that the audience will be more attuned to. They've done all kinds of creative things. So I would urge you to stick to principle, understand the principles, stick to principles, understand how we got where we got, question that, and then blow your brains open and think about new ways to do things. I'll end here. Clay Shirky, who's a brilliant professor at NYU, said years ago that he was a good teacher but a bad entrepreneur because he learned things in a certain way. He learned that you go to a store to try on pants, and you go to a store to get music, and you get your newspaper in the front yard every day. And he can understand the difference between that in this world, but he still brings those presumptions. You don't. You have the presumptions of a new world. And so you need to bring those presumptions to the questions that you bring for all of us old farts. And rethink this future that is yours. It's not ours, it's yours. That is a heavy responsibility. You have to reinvent it. You have to rethink what media and journalism are from the ground up. You have to rethink the relationship with the public, with many communities. You have to use these tools in ways that I can't imagine. Nobody thought to invent a newspaper for 150 friggin' years. So I don't know what the best use of this internet is going to be, because I can't envision it, because I'm still thinking in terms of media. And to some extent, so are you. So maybe it's your kids or your grandkids who will figure it out in 150 years. Think about that. We think that the internet is making life change really fast. I argue no. The change is occurring very slowly. It's only 1475, and we may have 500 years to go before this latest thing gets replaced by something new. I'll stop blathering there, because I'm eager to have a conversation. And that's not just questions, that's challenges and arguments, and call me full of crap, and it's okay. I value the conversation.
Okay, folks, the floor is yours.
Is that Jada? No? Is that, oh, you were doing your camera? I saw your fingers. That's what confused me.
I have a question. So with that spaceship idea, how do you think you prevent it from just becoming what it is today, where like certain other organizations, if they follow suit, will like cherry pick whatever facts they think serve their purpose?
So spaceship isn't a mass thing that tries to be everything to everyone. It's a good question. Because they realized that was the problem of where we are. So instead what they do is they try to model behavior. They bring in a smaller group of people. Now, by small, I mean they were getting 5,000 women across America to be part of one project. So it's a large number, but it's not 5 million or 50 million, right? They modeled the behavior, and they said that if you were going to start going off and attacking people, we're going to kick you out. This is a community. If you were at my house at a cocktail party and you started screaming at people, I'm going to ask you to leave. And that's okay. And they set an expectation that people cared about facts. And so people did. Now, is this a solution to all of our problems in society? No. But it starts to show what's possible. Part of the problem is that I think we have a snobbish attitude about the net that comes out of media, where we were the gatekeepers and we're jealous of that role. And so we think people aren't very smart. We think we're going to make them smarter. And we think we're different from them. No, we have to respect the voices of the public. Now, as I'm fond of saying, Twitter is not the New York Times, it's Times Square. You walk across Times Square and you're going to hear smart people and stupid people, right things and wrong things. That's society. That's the conversation that is society. And I think we have to respect people for their lived experience and for their perspective. We don't have to agree with them. We don't have to think they're right. We have to start with that expectation of dignity. And then I think they'll operate differently. The way media are set up now, from the earliest days, I started my first online sites for newspapers in 1994, 95, the beginning of the web, my children. And so I worked for the Newhouses, and they believed strongly in, who owned the paper in Springfield, they believed strongly in interactivity. And it was great. I learned a lot then. But part of the problem was that the journalists hated it. They didn't want to hear the public. They wanted to write their stories, have the public read them, get praise, and leave. That's a part of the reason we don't have trust. Our trust numbers are very low right now, lower than Congress right now. So I think we have to look and say it's not just about the bozos out there who may say stupid things, and we put a lot of effort into shutting them up. Spaceship says, no, let's model a new kind of conversation and behavior and show that it's possible. And they've done that.
Well, the other thing too that they did, and this is something to think about for your project, they took it to Facebook. They took it to a platform. They didn't try to keep it on the newspaper or in the print sort of version. So that would be one starting point for you all, is to think about, where do young people go for their news? You know, we talked about this a few weeks ago. And how can you use those platforms in ways maybe that, you know, you hadn't thought about before?
Right. Used to be you had to come to us for the journalism. We were the destination. That's how we built all our businesses. Now we got to turn that around. Now, BuzzFeed did that. For most of its success, 4/5 of the traffic of BuzzFeed occurred off of BuzzFeed on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and so on. Well, then what was their business? It took me a long time to get my head around that. And I finally realized what BuzzFeed does is they say, we have a skill. We know how to make our shit viral. We can help you, Madam Advertiser, make your shit viral. And we demonstrate it here on this site called BuzzFeed.com. But the truth is we do this across the whole web. So we're selling a skill rather than selling an audience. We're going to help you get your own stuff. Vice does the same thing. Vice has an advertising agency called Virtue. We make our shit cool. We make your shit cool. So what do we do in journalism? I think we've got to sell a skill. What's that skill? I would hope that skill is we know how to gather and serve communities. We can help you do that too, if you do that well. So yeah, we've got to think off platform, as we like to say. We've got to think of not just having a product that we want people to come to, but if we're a service, we have to go to people where they are. And so you see the smart publications, you know, the Washington Post has a brilliant, I think, because maybe I'm just old and it's kind of dad jokes. They've got a great TikTok guy who does really funny shit on TikTok. Now, does they make any money on that? No. But they have a relationship building with people in a new way. They say, well, Washington Post isn't so old farty anyway. Okay, let me try it, right? And it works in a way to rebuild that relationship. So taking the journalism to people where they are. Now, I think the platforms, I don't believe the platforms stole money from us. God didn't give us the revenue. They offered better deals to advertisers. Having said that, I wish the platforms would do a better job of educating us how to operate properly in their platforms to serve users there and make money there. They have not done a great job of that. So Google has lots of ads and they give out billions of dollars in advertising. Fine. Facebook has some mechanisms, but I don't think they've done a good enough job of working in partnership with us. So I just got off a call with a reading group at Google about the COVID crisis and expertise. And I'm begging them, let's work on things together where we can serve a public, I don't want to say an audience, a public together and do it collaboratively. And maybe, yeah, we'll need some support for that. But right now we're in a crisis. Let's figure out new ways to work together. Sorry, I have a long answer.
You know, BuzzFeed is an interesting model to look at because they also spun off the Tasty. Do you guys use Tasty, the food videos? And
especially now you're stuck at home.
One of the things that they did with that is, you know, they do these videos, but then they also sell print cookbooks that you can customize and pick your own chapters of what you want for the recipes in an actual print version. And I think, am I correct in recalling that they actually are selling like a hot plate?
Yes.
So they're selling hard goods, you know, Internet of Things from this media cooking brand that they developed. So
they're brilliant at it.
Very smart. Creating things that you can't live without that you didn't know you needed. And
so I'll give you another example. I just talked to a student of mine from Uruguay, a graduate in social journalism, who was feeling worried about the street food vendors because it's going to go away right now. So he just in a few days with a few other people set up a structure where on WhatsApp where people can connect to the street vendor. The street vendor will say, here's what I have today, here's the prices. They can make an order, it can be delivered to them at home, so we can help them keep their business going. Right? So how do we in local news right now in this crisis help vendors? Are we going to make a fortune at it? No. But could we help them at a time when Amazon is taking 6 weeks to deliver things and a toy store around the corner still has toys and little Sally's birthday is coming up? I saw somebody I know who has a toy store now trying to put their inventory online. Can we help with that? We don't have the structure, but maybe we could. We serve communities, we serve advertisers. That's a way to think. More students, please.
Cam,
I see initial C.
Cam.
Hi, I just wanted to get your opinion on the so-called freemium model, such as like basically having like an ad-free version that the customers pay for it, and then like a free version that has ads.
So, well, there's a few things there. One is freemium is that there's kind of a taste temptation, a sampling that's free, and then there's a paywall, right? And you can do that in a number of ways. You can do that behind the Telegraph says this stuff is paid and this stuff is free, period. The New York Times does a meter. You got a few pages a month and then sorry, bud, wall's coming down, right? Then you have places that I think The Independent says it's all free, but if you want the ad-free version, you got to pay. So those are three different models of pay. We still have to have value to people if they're going to pay. And I don't think we can presume that everybody's going to pay. The other problem right now is that I think we're giving up some money in things like contributions. Stat News, which is out of the Boston Globe, which is a really, really good health site. If you're going to get your health news right now around Corona, Stat News is great. They had a thing up the other day saying, contribute to us. I don't subscribe to Stat News. I'm not a medical person. I probably wouldn't. But I gave them $25 because I'm really grateful for what the work they're doing. We don't give people the opportunity to give. There's a wonderful YouTube video of a TED Talk by a singer named Amanda Palmer. And I don't usually recommend TED Talks, but it's really good because she talks about how she was a street performer. She gave people the opportunity to give. We don't do that in our business. We say we have a transaction that you're going to pay us for content. That works sometimes, but not always. Right now, with everything going on, The Guardian shows people, more than 1 million people have given to The Guardian. It's made them profitable. I had this discussion with the CEO of a major newspaper chain last week online where he's holding to his paywall. And I said, but you're giving up an opportunity to have people thank you. Maybe that's what you should do. I don't know until you try. One more thing to say about this. There was there was an argument that the New York Times committed an original sin by giving away its content online. And Martin Nissenholtz, who was the vice president of digital at the Times, defends himself and says, if we had not gotten a huge audience, 60, 70 million people, converting to paid at 2-3%, we wouldn't have all the subscriptions we have now. Versus the Times of London, which has always had a hard paywall. You don't get anything unless you pay Rupert Murdoch. Well, their paid audience is about 165,000 last I knew. And the New York Times, I think, is 3 million paid. What's the better strategy? Better strategy, I think, is to have gotten an audience, gotten people addicted to you, gotten them grateful to you, and then said, okay, here's the deal, folks. But that's the New York Times. And Martin also said that he worried that, a mid-level paper with a much smaller audience at a lower cost, with a lower conversion rate, with more churn, would not be able to do what the New York Times is doing. And my local Gannett paper isn't doing that well with its paywall because it's not the New York Times. So it depends on the product you have. If it's really valuable to people, if you're selling speed or uniqueness, yes. If you're selling a commodity that you can get anywhere else, no. And I think, Katrina, you're on.
So I was still kind of thinking about just the whole BuzzFeed form, and I just wanted to know what you thought about how the fact that they're so integrated. I know when they first started, they were more so kind of news, and then they expanded into a lot of different stuff. If I go on YouTube, I can watch a video on British people eat American snacks, or I can watch something like that, or I can go on their website and take a quiz on what kind of cake I am based on my zodiac sign. They do a bunch of different things, and I think, at least from my end, when they started integrating into a bunch of other areas, I know I stopped looking at their news section. So, to what point do you think something can be too niche or too integrated to the point that maybe you don't necessarily not to say not respect, but you know what I mean?
You lost your connection with them.
Yeah.
Is that true? Really good question, which is what people say when they want to buy it. Time for an answer. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think what went wrong with BuzzFeed is still making money. I wish, my blog is called Buzz Machine. People think I'm BuzzFeed. I wish I were. I'd have a lot of money. So they're still doing fine, but they've had struggles lately. And one of the struggles they had was that people tried to do what BuzzFeed did, but a lot worse. And so the platforms had to punish everybody who tried the same thing, and BuzzFeed suffered as a result in Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and such. Because BuzzFeed was doing a good job, but others were gaming the system. Because everybody, any system that can be gamed will be gamed. The other thing was, I think that they had to keep, it's the problem of venture capital, and I'm in favor of venture capital. We have to invest in businesses, but it expects huge growth. So what I hear you say, I hadn't thought of this before you just said that. I think maybe what happened with BuzzFeed too was they had to grow into so many more areas to show so much more growth that they lost their fans along the way. I hadn't thought of that before. I think you're right. The other thing is BuzzFeed News, which I wasn't sure about, is really good. Ben Smith, who was the editor who just left to become the media critic of the New York Times, which tells you something, but they did really good news. People laughed at them. Oh yeah, the listicle place is going to do news. They did really excellent journalism. But there was never a business model behind the news, I don't think. The advertisers weren't dashing to it. Right now, advertisers can be, pardon me, assholes. Even though they're our customers, we have to love them, and we're nice to them. But right now, advertisers are demanding that they not be next to any COVID content. We're all looking at COVID, and they're not there because they don't want to be besmirched with germs. That's the journalism they should be supporting. So advertisers are difficult. And I never thought that BuzzFeed News was going to have a real business model, because people would rather be next to the listicle than next to the news. It was kind of a charity on BuzzFeed's part to start this big news operation. My fear is that their investors are someday going to say, enough of that. That was fun while it lasted. You did your news, but now you got to be tough. So yeah, I think BuzzFeed could end up being hurt. Now, Jonah Peretti, the founder of BuzzFeed, he's trying to argue that what he wants to do is merge with like 5 other companies like that, right? So that they can all be stronger against Google and Facebook and stronger with advertisers. I don't know if that's going to work or not. Charlie, why don't you call on people, because you know who people are?
Yeah, maybe you could hum a few bars on local community newspapers.
So I wrote this quasi air quote book called Geeks Bearing Gifts, in which I argued the relationship strategy, which I still believe. But I then wrote a post sometime later that said, if I ran a newspaper, fat chance that'll ever happen. Here's what I do. And in that post, I confessed my errors in Geeks Bearing Gifts. My primary error was that I put too much faith in the idea of the hyperlocal blog. I'm a blogger. I started blogging after 9/11. I believe in blogs. I believe in the voices of people. I think it's a wonderful thing. I salute that flag. And I saw the beginnings of a structure around local that enabled somebody, one of you, to say, I'm going to pick a town. I'm going to pick Amherst, and I'm going to cover that town and do it as a blog. And we saw bloggers who were bringing in $250,000, $300,000 revenue for one town. Not bad. So I thought, okay, that's going to make sense. We can see cinder blocks of a new ecosystem of news. And then we have a news organization on top of that that doesn't have to do everything for everyone, but can concentrate on the larger stories in the larger areas. And there can be an ad network between the two. And I built this whole structure, and I was completely friggin' wrong. Why? Because running a blog as a business is hard. When you succeed, you get to eat ramen noodles every day, just like a student. You've got to do things that journalists don't want to do, like sell and do arithmetic and things like that. And so there weren't enough people coming in to do that. There are a lot of bloggers across this country still doing some great local blogs. BaristaNet in New Jersey, West Seattle Blog, and Evergrey in Seattle, Morristown Green in New Jersey. I can list a bunch of them.
And charging, or
no,
just or getting
advertising,
sponsors.
advertising.
Okay.
But it got harder and harder and harder and harder at a local level because advertisers could go to search advertising, they could go to social advertising at a very low rate, and retail was disappearing, and so on and so forth. So they're still chugging along, they're still trying it, but it's not the building block that I hoped it was. So what does local look like? I talked to somebody, it's his idea, so I don't want to give away too much. I talked to somebody right before the world blew up who had run a bunch of local blogs. And then he made a strategic mistake because he bought the local newspapers that were suffering. He did so right before the 2008 crash. So he sold it and lost it all. But he came to me with an idea. Again, I don't want to give away too much, but it was appealing that if you start with a given town, what is the base level of local news you need? And the classic answer is it starts with local transparency, right? It starts with knowing what happened to the school board. And you go to an organization like City Bureau in Chicago, they train people to go and cover the board meeting and bring back stuff in a reliable way. They pay them a little bit, $20, $30 to cover a meeting. They value their time. And then the higher level journalist looks at all this stuff coming in and says, yeah, same old stuff. Whoa, what's that? I'm going to make some phone calls. I'm going to figure out what needs to be added. I'm going to answer the questions that aren't being answered there. There's something to do journalism on there. There's something to investigate there, right? So you make the most efficient use of the trained journalist. You find a way to work with the community, and you bring transparency to a local government. There's more to it, but it's his idea, so I don't want to say much more at this stage. But I think that if you think about building from the ground up again, that may be the way to think. Now, we had something called Patch in the U.S., which was an attempt to bring local sites. They tried to make me an advisor, and I said no, because they were being mean to bloggers. They wanted to destroy the bloggers. They were going to take over the world. They had a very Silicon Valley attitude. And they were redlining journalism. They were going to towns that had nice downtowns and lots of money. They weren't serving until later towns where equity was an issue. And they had the ego to think, well, we got this down, and they started 900 sites across America before they'd figured out their business model. And so then they had made 900 mistakes. And to rethink that was almost impossible. Ended up selling the company. It's kind of a shell of its former self now. I strongly believe in local. Fred strongly believes in local, as it invested in local. Our communities matter to us. These communities have information needs. There are services we can bring to them. I believe we will crack this nut. But we're going to have to crack it, I think, in new ways. And I think that depending upon being able to create one product for all doesn't work so well. So then I talk about communities, right? So what are the communities across the Berkshires in helping the diabetics, or helping old people, or helping caregivers, or helping young people, or helping new parents? Now, the argument when I start talking that way is, okay, that sounds fine, Jarvis, but how the hell does that scale? Well, I think the skill scales. That if we can learn how to serve communities one after another, and do it collaboratively with those communities, I hope we can start to build something. Now, the risk there is I'm just making the same mistake I made with hyperlocal blogs and thinking, hey, kids, let's have a party in the barn. I don't know. But I think that local will demand solutions to their needs. Other interesting thing I heard in this conversation with this guy was that there was a study recently, and I've got to find it. I haven't found it. That found that towns with newspapers had lower debt rates.
Yeah, Notre Dame.
Thank you. Right? So people said, whoa, well, there's an economic basis to have a more transparent
I've
town.
written about this over and over.
Yeah, tell me more.
Well, it's just what it says. I mean, they've done it not only about tax rates, they've done it about voting, more people run. And the theory, is they took a couple of economists, they took towns of equal size and they compared them pretty much, they demographically the same. They found that the ones that had local newspapers had lower had better bond ratings. It was the
right. That was it. Bond rates.
And the municipal bond rating is better, so you pay less for your dollars, and therefore your taxes are eventually lowered. And I wrote about this for our paper, I guess a year ago.
Like, aren't you lucky to have us? Yes.
Yeah, no, well, I was saying that that in addition to doing something good, I mean, in other words, in addition to reading things about your community, you're actually helping if you buy the paper.
Yeah.
I have a question I want to ask.
Please, or challenge, Fred. You're in the front lines.
Actually that. Because we think, and I say we, I'm talking about my partner and I, that we can bring, that our newspaper brings something has something to sell that's different than Facebook and Google. We know more about our community than they do. Yes, they know more about our individual readers than we do because they know where you spent your money, where you know which movie you saw last week, and what TV show you what movie you rented last week, and what you bought yesterday. So they know more about the individuals than we do. But we're a small community. Berkshire County, where we serve, is 130,000 people. We're a blip in all of their data. But we know what's going on here. We know what is motivating people to make decisions locally. And so we're trying to figure out a way to take our knowledge that we say is superior about our community and turn that to our advertisers' advantage.
And if I could pile on, I mean, one of the things that was going through my mind when you were describing the readers being the source of stories is that I look to the reporters to have sources, to have the ingenuity to get the women who have been subject to Me Too to actually come out and talk. And it's those sources and it's that ability to be able to deliver the news that I think is of significant value that may not appear when the news is being generated by, and the ideas for the news is being generated by the reader.
So, to an extent, stipulated, Your honors, but I'll make a few arguments back. One is, it's not a community; it's many communities, and the internet gives you the opportunity now to recognize those communities in ways that you couldn't before, and thus serve them better. So in a sense, we did that. We had sections and columns and things, right? But let's say that you want to serve, come up with a product, a service for young parents. There's not a lot of news in that, right? Diapers and poop, you know, it's pretty much is what it is. But there's a lot of service we can bring. There's a lot that we can bring in terms of connecting mothers and fathers with each other, with bargains in town, with services, with information, all kinds of things. So we can recognize, we then learn who's a young parent, and we can then focus advertising differently on them too. We get first party data, as we say, that gives us a little bit of the benefit that Google and Facebook have, because we now know something about people, some of the people. And we can do that again and again and again. We can do that for old people, retirees. They have different information needs. And we can do that collaboratively where, yeah, I want the journalist to have the job on a beat to know what's going on and knowing more. But let us acknowledge, as Dan Gilmore said years ago, that he said, my readers know more than I do. He didn't say they were smarter than he was. They didn't say that they know, but as an aggregate, readers know a lot. A lot of our job, we're never the experts. We find the experts. Right? It's part of the problem of having the COVID coverage. I started a Twitter list of COVID experts, and the journalists are not doing a great job, including TV news, of getting the best experts there. That's what our expertise is, finding expertise, right? So part of that, if you're trying to go to serving young mothers and fathers, then they're expert in some things. They know where the best park is. They know what the kids like. They know, where the restaurant is. They know things, and we can be the intermediary that helps them share that with each other. Now, is that the same as covering the mayor? No. That's still a unique skill of watchdog journalism that we have to keep doing. But I do think that there are new opportunities here to serve people in new ways. And then you get to the business question. Part of this guy I talked to a few weeks ago, he was starting to think about a paywall, but a product to sell. And I was saying, well, let's think about a contribution model. In a public media model, how many people does it take to support the Berkshire Eagle for the Berkshires? Well, as many as you now have subscribers. If people could give you money, what would that look like? That's one question. Another question is, if they didn't feel they were giving you money, but they were giving money to the Young Parents Club, which you were also helping and supporting, and they're supporting you supporting it, what does that look like? If you're giving them bargains on diapers and strollers, and you're getting a piece of that yourself. It's not advertising, it's commerce, it's something new, but it's consumer revenue. It's not a subscription, but it's revenue from the reader. That's what I'm trying to say, is that we need, and I'm not trying to say that any one of those things is Messiah. I'm not trying to say that any one of those things has enough experience yet. It's like hydrochloroquine. We don't know enough yet, but we've got to start experimenting with these things across markets across the country and sharing that experience so that we can find new models. So that, for example, when I pushed this one newspaper chain to start selling goods through Amazon, they suddenly got a $2 million to them, bottom line revenue to them. Good, right? They tried something new in a new way. So what I'm really arguing for, especially for the class, who I'm sure is quite sick of me by now, is experiment, try new things, push the ideas.
Okay, so we just have a couple of minutes, and I'd love to hear a couple of more questions from students before we finish.
And I know it's hard to watch Zoom all friggin' day, folks. I know. I'm in the boat with you.
Nate, I'm looking at you. Do you have any questions for us?
Not really. I mean, just
What's your reaction to this?
I think it's interesting because I'm connecting it to one of my other classes where they talk about a content first strategy, which is basically creating content that aligns with the people that that aligns with your expertise and who wants to read about your expertise, and eventually offering them a product or service that aligns with their interests, and obviously your interest in your field of expertise. And the other thing I was thinking about in relation to that is how really the internet has kind of created most businesses and individuals as their own platforms for advertising. Like if I were, invested my time into getting 1 million followers on Instagram, and I could probably leverage that along with my own interest or knowledge to be able to sell a product. And so a lot of like what I want to think about for this project is how to kind of use that thinking for a newspaper, how a newspaper fits into that for people.
Okay. Other thoughts from other people, reactions to this? Jen, how about you? Your picture's right below mine.
I would say, like, of this whole conversation, like the one thing that stuck with me was about how you're talking about like how Google has all these different all this different data and analytics that lets you already know who this person is without actually getting to know them. And that's like their standpoint and their leverage in advertising, etc. So I was just kind of wondering, more also just like a general question for any type of like newspaper, but is something like giving surveys out to current or potential customers and like finding their interests and like what they align with and how information is presented, kind of like what ways are different like sources of news trying to do that?
We sure do.
Pardon me, and yes, I'm getting out my hand lotion right now. Don't worry, you won't get it from me. You want to ask another, or should I react to those two?
I was just asking like a general question of like what steps other companies are like taking to, because they don't have that extra data like Google does. They don't have that leverage. Like what kind of things are they doing to try and close that gap?
Good. So let me go to Nate's first. So the opportunity you see in becoming an individual who has that kind of relationship and market is what we see for journalists too. So we haven't announced this, and don't steal this, UMass, okay? But we see that we need to start thinking more about training the individual resilient journalist. We need a few courses on how to make money on Substack and YouTube and Medium and Patreon and Kickstarter for the individual journalist. That gets dangerously close to me thinking that hyperlocal blogs are the answer to the future. But we do see, we see, you know, like I know one of my former students, after Trump was elected, started a thing called, pardon me for this, the title is "What the Fuck Just Happened Today," and it's a summary of everything that's going on. Oh my God, we're overloaded, right? So it goes out as a daily newsletter, and he's making six figures doing that because he has a loyal audience and he charges for it, and he makes money on it. Pretty cool, right? I know people who are getting contributors on Patreon, not just musicians, but also journalists. So there's new opportunities that we need to go into. Second question about surveys. The problem with a survey is that it brings the prejudice of the questioner. I think up the questions. I think everything I want to know. I don't have the opportunity to hear what people might tell me that I wouldn't guess. So James Carey, who I quoted before, he argues that opinion polls are the death of democracy because they cut off the conversation that they are meant to measure, because I bring my questions to it. So what we teach our social journalism students, our regular journalism students, you know, they do the usual thing. They come in and they have story ideas. Not our social journalism students. The first thing they do is they pick a community that is self-defined. They observe that community, listen to that community, understand that community's needs, bring back evidence of all that, and then we figure out what the journalism is. And Charlie, that's not really them assigning us so much as that is us serving them. And I think I've hit your last 5 minutes.
All right. So Jeff, thank you so much. I feel as though we're just kind of getting warmed up and our time has flown right by. But thank you so much for stirring the thought process. Much appreciated. If I could
Thank you for having me. And Fred, if I could ever be of service, if you don't think I'm too much of a heretic, let me know.
I would love it. I would love it.
Good.
All right. So I'm going to ask the students to hang on for a minute or two. I just want to go over some planning for us. But Fred, good to see you, and Jeff and everybody, thank you. Thank you for joining us this
afternoon. Good to see you, Bill, too.
Good. Okay. Great. So a couple of things I want to go over. First of all, we are going to stick with what's in the syllabus for Wednesday's class, and in that class, we're going to look at some ethical issues that entrepreneurs face. And I'm asking you to write me an email in the morning with your reaction to some of the scenarios that I've developed, and they're all posted on Blackboard. I also have an idea, a scheduling idea for this project. So the way that I set it up initially, and I don't have the dates in front of me, but I have the student presentations spread out over 2 classes. And I think it may be a Wednesday and then a following Monday, whatever it might be. And I had the thought that it would be fine with me if we did all of the student presentations on the second of the 2 dates I had in mind, which would mean that we would have no class on the first date that I had scheduled for the student presentations, but we would have a longer class for the second one. So we would go, essentially twice the amount of time. Now I don't know whether what does that do? That gives you all, those of you who are going to present on the first day, some more time, which is fine with me. The only what I don't know is whether you all have the ability, whether you've got classes that follow this, and whether I'd be interfering with somebody else's class, which I don't want to do. So how do you feel about that idea? Is that a good idea, or should we just stick with plan A? Can I get some feedback on that? Well, okay, well, let me ask this. Does anybody not like the idea? Does that create, and I'm not putting it the right way, does it create a conflict for anybody? So nobody has a class that follows this. Okay, so do you want to show us, like, you want to clap for this idea? Is this a good idea? Okay, all right. So we will do that. So so this is the last sort of planning class for Project Eagle. And I thought this was a really nice one for us to end on. I mean, what Jeff is really saying to you is you got a blank sheet of paper. And I think I said to you day one, I wanted you to be creative with this, and I wanted you to have fun with it. I want you to recognize that it's a very, very challenging project, because this is one where you've got a blank sheet of paper and you can really do anything with it. And what I'm really looking for is some effort. And I hope that you all are connecting with each other and talking to each other, and the groups have been brainstorming. I don't think this is a project where you're going to be able to meet for the first time the day or two before and pull off something that's good. And so you need to sort of have some brainstorming sessions, and then think about it, sleep on it. And I find that I do some of my best thinking when I'm walking by myself, or I'm by myself riding my bike somewhere, and an idea will come to me. And I think this is how this has got to evolve for you. So I really encourage that. I hope you have some fun with it. And I'm happy to, as I've said, I'm happy to talk to people along the way. If you got questions or you want to chat with me about it. But at this point, I'm turning you loose. And in terms of the format of the presentation, I would like, prior to your presentation, a summary of your key takeaway points. And you may have, and I don't know what your ideas are going to be, so I don't know what the format of that is going to look like. But I would like somebody, it can be in bullet point form. It doesn't have to be sort of a formal paper, but I want something in writing where I have a summary of what your key points are. And I'd like to have that, say the day before the presentations. But in terms of the presentation itself, you can use whatever format you think makes sense for the presentation that you've got, and you should plan on having about 15-20 minutes or so per group for your presentations. And you may have questions for me along the line in terms of a best way to present something. Maybe it's a video, maybe it's a PowerPoint, maybe it's some other format. I'm going to leave that to you, but it's really, I think, going to be quite dependent upon what your content looks like. So, questions? Okay. So I guess that's the game plan. So I will see you all on Wednesday, and we'll talk about ethical dilemmas, and I'll look forward to getting your email to me in the morning, and enjoy the rest of this nice day. All right. Be good, everybody, and be well.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.